Hello, everyone, and welcome to Hit and Hustle from IrishSportsDaily.com. I am your host, Greg Flamong, and with me, as always, is Jamie Ueyama, Mr. Jamie University. It is Tuesday, June 20th, and we are going to talk about recruiting. We are going to talk about the visitors who just came by. We're going to talk about a recruit who Notre Dame just offered, camped at Notre Dame, who has set a commitment date for tomorrow. That's Taebron Bennie-Powell. We have not talked about him on this show because this is all very recent for him. So we're going to talk about him and what he could bring to the class, safety recruiting, all that stuff. Malcolm Ziegler and Kyngstonn Flowers as well. So we're going to talk about those guys. And then we have a fun hypothetical that Coach Humph brought up on the show yesterday, and then he posted in the replies to last week's show. And so it's a 2024 playoff hypothetical. So we're going to talk about that. And Jamie and I were talking, we might make that a hypothetically speaking might be the new gimmick title, like Hot Take Tuesdays or Hot Take Thursdays, whatever. Hypothetically speaking, it might be a whole segment on our show. So we'll see how it goes. And we'll talk about that. First of all, Jamie, how was your Father's Day? How did you spend it?
It was good. Just spent some time with the family. My wife gave me a little bit of free time to myself too, if I wanted it.
Brilliant.
So that was great. Just want to say that take the for the mic issues from Vamos Irish. Last week, you're trying to blame it on. I was traveling last week. That's why I used the AirPods Vamos Irish. Okay, that was the deal there. I think it's actually been pretty good
last show, I don't think we had any problems.
Yeah, the first week with the new mic, I would say not great. But other than that, it's been all right. So
Pops. So Pops says that Greg brought up a rumor. So I should address this because I need to do. So, okay, there are enough regulars in the chat right now, okay, that you guys, I need you guys to help me out because sometimes what I do is when I'm on the show, I lose sight of the fact that not everyone is in the chat. Like some people will not watch this show on YouTube at all. And it's just podcast. And some people will just watch later and they're not. And so I just assume everyone can see what's going on in the chat. And therefore I don't need to add context for people who listen later, but I do need to do that. And so the Peyton Bowen thing last week, people are talking about him in the chat. That's why I've not heard anything about him. It wasn't anything that we heard. It was literally that moment. And I was like, wow, a lot of people are talking about this. And since Christian is here and he's on the reporting side, I'll just ask him. Then we could squash it or confirm it or whatever. And so that's what it was. And so Matt texted us hey, everyone is texting me. Why are you guys talking about Peyton Bowen? And I was like, oh, I messed up. I made a boo-boo. So you guys need to tell me hey, Greg, make it clear. I have to put a disclaimer on things when I'm doing that. So that was my fault. Jamie. But whatever, it's one of those things. It's not state secrets, right? It was just a miscommunication on my part, and that's my bad, Jimmy. That's my bad.
All I heard there was Peyton Bowen to Ohio State. That is something, whatever. I think we both do all the time. It's hard because we're just talking. It's like the old BS report. It's flowing conversation and
free flowing. Yeah, exactly.
There's people who get in the chat, and sometimes we respond to them. But we do need to do a better job of giving context, especially for the people who are listening in podcast form. So we'll try to do better going forward. But it is funny how those kind of things just take on a life of its own.
Yeah. So it is what it is. But my Father's Day was spent at the soccer field. My daughter had another tournament. Thankfully, they're on a club break right now, so there's 3 weeks coming where there's going to be no soccer at all. So that's nice. But so we were at the soccer field. There was a chance they wouldn't qualify for the championship game, which meant I would have been home, get to spend I could have watched the whole U.S. Open like I wanted to, but they made the championship game. They ended up losing 2-1, but whatever. No one cares about that. But so that's what my Father's Day was. But that's fine. I got to go to the U.S. Open on Friday. Shout out to Tommy Knack, poster member on ISD. Those guys did a great job, and it was awesome. Like bucket list for me going to the U.S. Open, and so that was really good. So yeah, that was my Father's Day. So hope everyone out there, all the fathers, had a good Father's Day. And before we get into the show, Jamie, we have to talk about ESQ Clothing, ESQclothing.com. I hope everyone took advantage of the promo, the Father's Day promo that Ga Wang put out there. It was 20% off of all merchandise purchased from the website. I'm going to be wearing my ESQ shirt to a wedding. I have a wedding this weekend. I'm going to be wearing that. People are going to be jealous of me. People are going to be asking me questions, and I'm going to be happy to send them to ESQclothing.com to check out my bamboo shirt. It's going to be breathable. It's going to be stretch. It's going to have breathability. It's going to be comfortable. I'm going to feel light. I'm going to be killing it on the dance floor, Jamie. People are going to be wondering what's gotten into Greg, and it's my new ESQ
bamboo
shirt. It's the bamboo shirt, man. I'm going to be flying all over the place. So check out ESQclothing.com. Upgrade your shirt game, everybody. It's great. It's great stuff. All right, Jamie. Do you want to get into the recruiting? Everyone's itching to find out about Kyngstonn Valiamu-Asa and out of St. John Bosco, the linebacker. Like I said last week, he's fallen out of the top 100, Jamie, which means he could be trending to Notre Dame. That I think once players start dropping in the rankings, you feel like maybe Notre Dame has a chance, because that's usually how it works. So he visited, and by all accounts, it sounds like it went really well. It sounds like Notre Dame is firmly in a position to win this recruitment, and asking around, if he had to choose today, it would be Notre Dame, but he doesn't have to choose today, Jamie. And he's got to go to Ohio State this weekend, and that's going to be a big one. Apparently, James Laurinaitis is a recruiting guru for the linebackers. Apparently, that was a much bigger loss than we would have said, like when it happened, from a recruiting standpoint. But he's over there. So, Jamie, tell me about Kyngstonn Valiamu-Asa. We've talked about him a little bit as a player, but how important is he to the class? I mean, obviously, he's a very highly ranked player. So from the ranking standpoint, and for where Notre Dame finishes in terms of like the team rankings and that sort of thing, he's very important. But what about his actual like positional play and where he fits into the class in general?
Yeah, I do think for the ranking part, kind of the perception, I think that does kind of matter a little bit, right? Like It's not as important as everything else, but it does matter because, as of where he's ranked, who they're going against, who they're they got to beat USC, they got to beat Ohio State to get them. That kind of stuff does matter, right? It does matter because you want to land those guys and you want to land the next guy after that too, right? So you want to show that you can do that these kind of guys are coming to Notre Dame. So, I think that part is important. But just in terms of a player, like I think he's one of the top linebackers in the class. I'd put him in the top 5, top 3 in the class. A guy who's extremely versatile. I mean, he can rush the passer off the edge. He's a great blitzer. You see him shed blocks. He's not a guy just like a hit and run guy like some of these linebackers where he's just a great athlete and nothing more. He's a really, really good football player and a really good athlete. And you see recognition and things, just the violence, the overall violence he plays with. And, what they are saying in terms of what they're showing him is like he play in that kind of Maris Leofau role. And the way I would kind of describe the player that he could be is the guy that everybody wants Maris Leofau to be.
Yeah.
Right. That's kind of how I would describe it. Obviously he's much more physically developed and advanced than was. Maris was kind of more like a hybrid safety guy when he was in high school, and definitely a late bloomer. So, but just in terms of like what his role would be is like doing that role at a very, very high level. is kind of what he can be. And I just think you have only so many like game wrecker types, right? That are in this class in general. And I think there's certainly some guys on defense that I could see make a jump to that kind of level of where you kind of project them to be later on, like a Bryce Young for sure. Like I could see that happening with him. You know, I could see a Cole Mullins, a Logan Thomas. I could see those guys really taking that jump. I could see, you know, you could see that with like a Leonard Moore, a corner, some of these other guys. But I mean, he's the one guy that I would say just right now is the most kind of projectable to be that. And just because of that, and like, you know, he'd be the equivalent of on defense for Notre Dame. Multiple guys like that in this class. But they definitely need at least one. And he would be to me, he's the guy at the top of the list for them right now.
Yeah, and so I talked to Christian, or I was talking to Christian about it last week, and to me, he's the kind of guy who, it's like they come from St. John Bosco, so like St. John Bosco to Notre Dame is very similar, right? It's not like a huge culture shock in that sense. Obviously, going from California to South Bend would be a pretty big deal. I mean, I think frankly, going from California to Ohio would be a big deal for him as well. Which is obviously a bigger campus, just a completely different field than what he's used to. Maybe that means a lot to him. He's talked a lot about how NIL it doesn't play a big factor for him. Like he has said he looks beyond that, which is obviously good for Notre Dame. Like those are the types of players that they're going to be after in terms of just the way they view, not just NIL, but the way they view, I guess, life in what their mindset is. And that sort of thing is what's going to lend itself to someone who wants to attend Notre Dame. I just really, like you said, like he's just the way that he plays, like his instincts, he seems to, I mean, he's on a star. He's a star on a team of stars, basically, right? That program just has a
fantastic program. They have a ton of Division I talent, and he's he's the best defender on the team. So.
Right. And I mean, talking about like Peyton Woodyard is on that team, right? And he's going to Georgia. So it's a big deal. Right. Peyton Woodyard's going to Georgia. I mean, he's committed to Georgia now. He might not go somewhere else, but like might go into, it's either Georgia, Ohio State, or Alabama or something like that. So he's a top player. Kingston's the best on that team. So I think that's a big deal if Notre Dame's going to land him. And so we'll see what comes of that. So Mike in the chat is asking about Nate Roberts, and we should talk about him because he is a commitment from the 2025 class. He's a tight end from Oklahoma. And Mike is asking about your evaluation of Nate Roberts because Mike says he's seen him play out in Oklahoma. He is not in any large classifications. And in a recent state title game, he goes on to say later, he wasn't the best player on the field. So Jamie, how do you evaluate a player like this where he's a sophomore? So you've seen sophomore tape of him. And they play in a football game where it's like you are projecting what someone is going to turn out 2 years down the line, right? So you see him in a football game, and according to Mike, let's just say, I don't know how you would evaluate this particular game, but like he's not the best player on the field yet, right? And I think you say 2 years from now, you kind of project like this is where it's going. How do you make those projections 2 years away? Let's just talk about that without getting into Nate Roberts specifically.
Well, I think I'd need a lot more context than he wasn't the best player on the field, because if he wasn't the best player on the field as a sophomore in a state title game, it's not like it was just like a regular whatever preseason. Right. Like, I mean, they're in the state title game. I think there's probably a lot of other good players, and I know it's a lower classification, but I mean, in general, like, the team that they're going to play and his team probably has good players, in a state title game. So, I mean, that's part of it. I mean, I do think when you're playing at the way you look at it, when guys are playing at maybe a lower level in a state that maybe, I mean, you're not playing, say you're not playing at that level with that level of talent and all that. How dominant is that player at that level? So, I mean, Mike says he wasn't the most dominant guy in the field. Okay, that's fine. Also, you're projecting how it would be not even 2 years from now. It's like 4 years from now. So you're looking at all of, you're looking at these kind of things, especially for a guy who's like a high school sophomore. And so he's like, 6'5", 225 right now. Well, he probably was like 215 or whatever during that season or whatever, right? So, I mean, next year's going to be different. All the he's gonna put on more weight. He's gonna do these different things. Like I think when I look at him like here's a guy who gives a rare effort as a blocker, and I think is going to be a very good blocker. But you could see he doesn't have like kind of like the functional strength that you would need it to be an inline guy. But you can see it happening for him, right? You can see it happening for him, and that's part of it. And also, I think he's a guy that is a good athlete, but is probably going to become a better athlete, right? Going forward as he gets stronger, as he gets faster and kind of physically develops. So, I mean, it's all projecting someone going forward. I do think that, how you see them in person, how they perform in big games and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to say it doesn't matter. It does matter, right? It does matter. But I mean, is Mike saying he was one of the worst guys on the field? Because if he's one of the worst guys on the field that day, then that's a different story, right? If he's not one of the best, if he's like not the best guy on the field in a game like that, the classification, but he's a sophomore, I'm like, okay, well, how does he look as a junior? I mean, do I think that he's going to be the best player out of this game? Is he going to be the best player 4 or 5 years from now when he's in college? That's what you're looking for, right? And if there's something there that gives you concern to think maybe he's not going to be that guy, then I think that those are valid, critiques of somebody, right? But you can't just look at how somebody is on that day, because there's also some guys too who are dominant high school players, like just great high school players that are great as sophomores, and they're like one of the best guys in the team. But how do they project going forward, right? How do they project going forward? Like, where do you see, what's their potential? What's their ceiling? Well, I think all of that kind of matters. The coaching strategy. I'm like, I mean, I don't know enough about his team and everything they are, but I mean, I've seen a lot of guys where like here's a perfect example. Peyton Bowen doesn't play in a high level of football in Indiana. He's clearly, is a dominant player there. But I went to a game with Matt Freeman. We went to a game that he was playing against a higher level team, and it was clear that he was really good, but he wasn't the best that day. He was a junior. It was like junior year. Why? Because the coaching was bad. Like his staff didn't do a job of utilizing him. They ran away from him all game long, and so he had made no impact as a linebacker. It was, he was just not someone that if you just went up and you had no context of who he was or whatever, you'd be like, hey, that kid looks like a good athlete, but you would have never said this guy is going to be on stuff.
Yeah. We apologize. Jamie has a little bit of connection issues today, so he's going to be going in and out. It's not his microphone. There's just a connection issue. We don't know what it is. We checked it out before. It wasn't really, for some reason, connecting the right way. But so to Jamie's point, like I do think so you have a game, right? And if I think for tight ends too, like it's hard to stand out in a game, like especially in a state championship game. Like if the tight end, if they are playing a certain kind of way, like if he doesn't make a huge impact, like was Michael Mayer the best player on the field against Ohio State? No, right? Like no one would say that. Like he didn't have a huge impact. but at the same time, like, we know he's a great player. So it's just like there's so much more context that goes into that. And that's the thing that were you talking about? You were talking about Drake Bowen just a second ago, not Peyton.
Oh yeah, did I say Peyton? I meant Drake.
Yeah, Drake Bowen, right? So that context was about Drake Bowen there. So sometimes like a tight end just doesn't have a big impact in a game, right? And that's, like we said, he's a sophomore or whatever. I mean, the thing is like he's got a lot of offers, so it's it's not like Notre Dame is out of step with this. It's not like
I think
Notre
George
Dame
is a pretty good.
Yeah, like Notre
good.
Dame's not out of pocket here, right? They kind of they know what it is, right? And so there's the one game, and we're not saying you're wrong, and I don't want to I'm not trying to just make aspersions on whether or not Mike knows what football, or his opinion is his opinion. That's fine. It's just that there's enough evidence here where Notre Dame's not out of step. A lot of teams are on him. You take him, like Jamie said, 2025 is a deep tight end class. They're going to take another tight end next class. So I'm fine with it. Like I personally, I didn't think anything of it in terms of the earliness. Look, this is what you do, right? Like if you're a tight end university and you're good at recruiting tight ends, the good tight ends want to come play with you. And that's what Nate Roberts is. And so I think it's a good addition to the 2025 class, right? Like it's just, especially with the context that Jamie said, they're going to take more, right? It's not just going to be the one tight end. So I think it's a good addition.
He's a very good prospect. He's very good.
Yeah. I mean, you compared him to Cole Kmet.
Yeah.
Which would take, right? Like I think that would be like a really good outcome. So that's Nate Roberts, who committed over the weekend. All right. Taebron Bennie-Powell. He camped at Notre Dame. I think it was it last weekend or 2 weekends ago?
Last week or whatever.
Last week he camped at Notre Dame and earned an offer as a safety. Context about Taebron Bennie-Powell, and you had some good stuff about him and his coach, who gave Bennie-Powell his, I guess, endorsement as an athlete, as a safety, who has a really good track record of like being able to identify and vouch for players. When he vouches for a guy, that guy usually hits, right? And you gave some really good examples from players that ended up at Cincinnati. You can add some context to that later in just 1 second. But so there's that piece, right? Playing out of position because, he didn't play safety because Ben Minnick was a safety last year. And they also had a safety who went to Ohio State, who Notre Dame was after, right? So you have two D1 safeties. Hartford. Yeah, Malik Hartford. So you have two D1 safeties at your high school, right? So you can't play safety. So I think the fact is, like, it's not that, you have two D1 safeties ahead of you, so you have to be a backup. They found a place for him. He's playing on the line of scrimmage. Like, he is not a big guy. They found a place for him. And he's basically playing almost like a Jalen Smith in 2013 kind of role, where he's just kind of out there on the line, blitzing, setting the edge. Like he doesn't have that kind of size. He's not going to play that in college, but he made it work. He was a playmaker in that instance. The thing is, and this is the case for a lot of guys that they're looking at safety, you don't see him play safety. You don't see him doing those things. And so that's obviously what you wouldn't want to see. That's why Notre Dame camped him out. They saw him play. They saw him, working his pedal. They saw him in transitions. They saw him turn and run. They saw him do all those things. They liked him enough. The coach vouched for him. And so they offered him a scholarship, right? When the offer first came in, I was at the U.S. Open. Right. So I'm not really looking at my phone. Right. And
humble brag there.
Humble brag. I'm very important at the U.S. Open, but I see it and I'm not really thinking of it because I'm busy, but I'm like, huh? Like what? I don't like it when they make offers of people I don't know. But, the more I dig into it, I kind of understand. And I understand a lot of people having a kind of a negative reaction. At the same time, this is the type of player that I think they should go after. And I don't want their overall process for the position to sour people on Bennie-Powell, the player, because I do think they should take swings like this. The problem is that you want other players in pocket to take a swing like this. But that's not Bennie-Powell's fault. That's not his problem, right? So I think there's a difference between Bennie-Powell, the player, and the take, and the way that they've handled safeties in this class. Jamie, tell us about Bennie-Powell.
Yeah, first off, I just totally agree with that, Greg. Like, I think that the whole idea of, like, you know, them missing on their top targets and maybe obviously has more experience playing the position and all that. That's like almost like it's like a completely different conversation, right? It's a different conversation, and it has, like you said, it has nothing to do with Taebron Bennie-Powell. So, yeah, he played out of position. How he fits, you know, how he fits at safety. They worked him out, but you got to see him play safety, all of that, right? So, but I think it's important. They worked him out. They liked him. First of all, if you just look at this, is just like the last decade of rising seniors that they've offered, right? From camps. So guys who are rising seniors, by that I mean guys who are going into their senior year of high school, right? So guys where it's like, if you're getting an offer right now, it's late, right? It's late in the process, right? Because most of the guys who are coming to camp are the guys who are going to be sophomores and juniors, and those become main guys for you after these camps, right? So, but here's a list of the last 10 years. Ade Ogundeji, Jameer Jones, Paul Moala, Jay Brunel, Ashton Craig, Ben Minich, Joe Otting, who had an offer, but basically he came to camp and they were like, okay, yeah, we'll take you.
Yeah.
I mean, I include him as well. And then Taebron Bennie-Powell. So that's the list, right? And so Craig, Minich, Otting, TBD on everything with them. Obviously, like, these guys are just getting started, basically, in their careers. But I think you can look at, based on how they're perceived after and how all these guys moved up a bit in the rankings, right? Like, Ashton Craig got him invited to the All-American game, right? He was, I think he became like a high 3-star player in the composite, but was like a 4-star a couple places. I had him as a 4-star. I really liked him. And I've heard all we're going to see, but he
All right, we lost Jamie for a second. Let's see if he can recalibrate the internet situation. He's frozen there. So those are Jamie's going to talk about. What I would say is head over to irisportsdaily.com. Jamie is what he is talking about here. He has written about Taebron Bennie-Powell in terms of the types of players that Notre Dame has offered and the hits that they have from those players when they have come to camp. That usually works out for Notre Dame, right? So he talks about Ade Ogundeji. He talks about Jameer Jones. He talks about those guys. And it's like, these aren't hits. These aren't always hits in terms of like, he's going to be a star, right? And that's where I think that people get down on a take like this from Taebron Bennie-Powell, because Notre Dame needs a star at safety, right? Everyone was so excited about Peyton Bowen last year and what he could be, because Notre Dame just had a star in Kyle Hamilton. It's like, that's what we need, right? Like, that's what people think. Notre Dame needs stars like Kyle Hamilton. You miss on Peyton Bowen, and now in this class, they're after a lot of 3-star guys, like a lot of lower 4 stars. And you think, wow, Notre Dame's taking a step down with this. And fans don't like that, right? And even as an analyst, like, it's something that I notice, it's like, you're not after the same caliber of player, right? But you do need solid players on your football team, right? And Taebron Bennie-Powell fits what Notre Dame is looking for in terms of it fits what Notre Dame is looking for in terms of the athleticism, the size. Apparently, he's got this broad jump that is like 118 inches, which is like flying through the air. And so it's just it's Stevie Wonder, which is a good point. Like stars would be nice for sure, but Gilman and Elliott were a great tandem and not necessarily stars. And that's a good point, right? Like those guys were very good football players. Like although Gilman's still in the NFL, right? Jalen Elliott kicked around in the NFL, right? Like these are good college players, and that's what you need as well. But you also want to get those guys who can be high-end players, right? And you want the high-end players. So that's what I'm saying, where I understand where fans are coming from with their unhappiness with the safety position as a whole, right? Like on the macro level, but on the micro level for Taebron Bennie-Powell, I think this is a good take for them. You bet on traits. Like I do think it's a good idea to bet on traits. Like I remember, like Jamie just brought up, Illinois, right? And Jamie brought up, let's see if Jamie's back here.
We just can't catch a freaking break with this internet.
Can't get a break with the internet. So Jamie brought up Illinois, and I remember when Baylor had a bunch of guys drafted. It was a couple years ago with their wide receivers and a couple safeties. And it's like they just basically bet on track guys. We're going to find track guys. We're going to put them out there, and we're going to do it. And then Notre Dame fans a lot, and not just Notre Dame fans, but all over college football, we say Notre Dame fans because we follow their team. But it's like Notre Dame fans say, why can't Notre Dame just do that then? Like novel concept, like find track guys and mold them into football players, right? Find guys who can run and then teach them how to play. Well, that's what, now Notre Dame's doing that. The thing about that is like no one was excited about Taquan Thornton when he committed to Baylor, or when Woods, the safety, like when he committed to Baylor, like they were low-rated players. Then they turn into pros, right? So like you do have to be patient with the fact that like this is what Notre Dame is doing. Marcus Freeman, he outlined this to Matt when Matt talked to him one-on-one. This is what they say. And so this is what Marcus Freeman said he was going to do. And so, okay, this is what they're doing. They're betting on traits, right? But Tyler Hack says, all we want is 2 top 50 safety signings per year. Is that really too much to ask for? I mean, you would like one, like you would like someone in the top 100, right? You would like someone like a Peyton Woodyard. Like what you want is you want Peyton Woodyard. But then you also want, Taebron Bennie-Powell. Like no one would care about Bennie-Powell or Ziegler or Bronte Johnson or Urlacher if Peyton Woodyard was in full, and he's not. And that's the problem, right?
Yep.
Everyone would be totally fine with these guys if they had someone who was this guy we know can play, and they don't. And that's the issue. So it's unfortunate for Taebron Bennie-Powell. He is committing tomorrow, probably to Notre Dame, sometimes I don't need to ask Matt, right? Like sometimes I don't need to ask Christian, like, what do you think? Because they offered him, they camped at Notre Dame. They offered him, he set a commitment date for like 2 days later. Come on. Like no one needs you should have a subscription to irishsportsdaily.com, but smart people know where this is traded. I mean, but that's not inside information. And if he chooses somewhere else, I will look like a goofball, but that's fine.
Okay, just the one thing that I'll add to it is safety. Like I mean, you want to like Kyle Hamilton. That's what you want. You want to get a Kyle Hamilton every year. You want to get that level of guy. Those guys typically, like the top guys in the class, are the guys that do pan out, right? Basically, after those top guys, though, it's like a steep drop. It's a crapshoot from there. As you can kind of see, and obviously Notre Dame has had guys like Houston Griffith was very highly rated. Max Redfield, very highly rated. I mean, it doesn't always work out because it's a very difficult position to play.
Derek Allen.
And there's all these other pieces. Hey, we're going to take great athletes. Max Redfield's a great athlete. He just wasn't a good safety, So, there's all these kind of things that go to it. Development is what's going to matter the most. Just quickly on Taebron Bennie-Powell. So his coach, Coach Bolden, who was at Coleraine before he's at Lakota Westnet, right? So he's obviously was a guy who recommended Ben Minute last year, and that worked out pretty well for Notre Dame. And they've had a ton of blue chip guys from Lakota West in recent years. They got 3 guys at Ohio State right now. They got another blue chip guy. They like 4 starters in the secondary in the last 2 years that were blue chip guys, right? So a lot of talent there. They did a good job developing them. And I think too, Greg, you'd agree with me that if you watch like Minute and Hartford, you watch those safeties, you're like, man, these guys are well coached.
Yes,
like they're
absolutely.
So that's a good thing. But then also he had, he was at Coleraine before, which is in Cincinnati, and they sent a ton of guys to Cincinnati, like the Cincinnati Bearcats, when all those guys were there. And like every one of them hit big. And they were like not high ranked guys at all. They were just guys that he believed in, obviously, and sold them on. And it's like actually kind of incredible how well all of those guys have done. And it's here, I'll just go quick. 2 of the guys, linebacker Ivan Pinter and Beaver, transferred to guys somewhere else. First team All AAC in 2021. All 18 and a half in 2021, 7 tackles in INT and a tackle for loss, 2 years eligibility left. Eric Phillips, starter at defensive end, 13 Havoc plays in 2022. Defensive tackle Dante Corleone, 3rd-team All-American last season, highest graded defensive tackle in the country by PFF. The average ranking for these guys, 1,907. So none of them were ranked in the top 50 in the state of Ohio. So they weren't top 50 prospects in the state of Ohio, and they all ended up being good players. So if you look at the track record of guys, regardless, I mean, I have questions. I want to see him play safety. Like I want to see, I want to see that this season, and I want to see him have a great season. That's important to me, right? To be able to see that. But the track record of guys that they have offered who have worked out for them and earned offers as seniors, most of those guys have hit and been good players for ND. And the guys this guy has recommended who didn't look like elite prospects, but ended up being really, really good football players, it's like 100% basically for the guys that he recommended that went to Cincinnati. So I would say, even though I still have plenty of questions about Taebron Bennie-Powell and I want to see him play safety, just on that, it's probably a good, going to be a pretty decent player for Notre Dame. So, and I also think his ranking will end up going way up as well. And if they don't, they'll probably regret it, because they must regret all those guys that they ranked way too low who end up being really good players in Cincinnati. So,
yeah. And so you just have to see, and like Tyler Hack, right? Like Tyler Hack says, he ran a 4.6 for the staff last week, apparently not birder speeds, but sufficient. If he did run a 4.6, like that actually would be red flaggy to me, just because that's like, who knows the kind of surface and all those other things, right? Like I don't.
It's a slow surface. It's at Notre Dame. It's a slow surface.
It's a slow surface. Here, the other part too is like he just worked out for them. Like they have to be confident in his athletic ability. He was just there, right? Like James Lorenzensi says, I'm not sold on this one. I just don't think he's fast enough to play safety. That's probably based on film. And like film is from 7-8 months ago, right? Like maybe he just got faster, right? Like he was just there. the in-person evaluation. So like, it's fine. Like I think that they are sold on his athletic ability. They have to be, because they wouldn't take him otherwise. So we just have to see there. I'm very interested to see a safety film. I'm very interested to see where it goes. And they are obviously confident in it because they offered him a scholarship. It looks like he's going to be in the class. So that's what I would say about him.
Can you just throw up that Murphy Eggers comment there? Because I just want to add context.
Are we conflating BK and his staff's track record with Can't Be Val's with Freeman's?
Okay, here's why none of it kind of matters, and why I'm not specifically talking about Brian Kelly compared to Marcus Freeman and staff. Because if you look at the guys who offered these players, like Keith Adeo Deji was a Keith Gilmore guy, obviously a guy on staff for very long for Notre Dame, right? Jameer Jones, Brian Van Gorder. I mean, people aren't raving about BVG as an evaluator or a recruiter, right? Jeff Quinn, much maligned Jeff Quinn, you know, is like Ashton Craig. Like, it's all these different guys. I'm just telling you, I mean, it was like, I mean, I can't even remember who was the safety coach at that time, but like, it was whatever, 2014 or 2013 or whenever. I think it was 2013. So, but anyways, it's all these different coaches that are involved in it. So the kind of, it's not the point of like, first of all, Brian Kelly was definitely not there. Like, man, I'm watching this guy close. That's not what Brian Kelly did. A lot of that is the assistant coaches. And it's just one of these things where I just think overall, over time, Almwala was a Mike Elko there. You know, I mean, it's just all of these guys. It's the range of assistant coaches who made these evaluations. It's very different. I mean, one thing you can say was Jay Brunell was not a Del Alexander, was a Brian Pole. So anyways, but all of these kind of things, you know, are part of it, but there's all these different coaches that were involved in it. But just regardless of the coach, Mike Elson was Jonathan Bonner was Mike Elson, right? Like all different guys, but just the thing they have in common is that, you know, most of the guys end up pretty good. So it is what it is. That's just a real thing. Most of those guys end up being pretty good.
Okay, so I need to credit this to Mike Singer then. Tyler Hack said, double checked. Mike Singer on 3 said he ran a 4.60 with a 4.3 shuttle. So we have to attribute that to Mike Singer for that report. So he deserves credit for those numbers. So that's credit to Mike Singer for getting that. The other part too, Jamie, that you were saying about conflating BK and Marcus Freeman, the through line is that a lot of time coaches, they want as much information as on a prospect as they can get. And when you have prospects like all over the country, right, it's hard to get the top guys into your camp to come camp for you, right? And so some guys and a lot of guys, and not just that, but there's so many players. You can't see everyone, right? And so someone like Taebron Bennie-Powell, who's playing out of position, who isn't, you know, it's not well known, right? People aren't going to scout him. It's hard for people to identify diamonds in the rough like this. When I say, and I'm using that as a catch-all for, like, right? There are players all the time who it's like, hey, this guy's a 3-star. Why is he so good? It's like people can't go see him. If they can't see everyone. So when someone comes into your camp and you can see them move around and you can actually test them and you can put them in drills that will, for you, identify this guy can play and this guy can't. When you can do it yourself, whether it's BK or whether it's Marcus Freeman or whether it's whoever, it doesn't matter. The fact is these guys can see them move around. And if they offer, it doesn't happen. It's not like every time there's a camp, hundreds of players come into their camp every year. Maybe one gets an offer, maybe one, maybe two. So the point is like they don't always send out offers to guys, but when they do, that's a hit. And it's like you can feel confident because they got their eyes on them. It's like, why do these coaches go to the combine every year? Everyone says the combine is stupid. Well, why does Bill Belichick spend all this time at the combine every year? They want to see them. They want to see them do this stuff. That's why. So I understand the question from Murphy in terms of like why are we attributing the good job that BK did with the job that Marcus Freeman did? To me, it's more about it's rare that these guys get an opportunity to test out someone like this, and that's why they like the camps, and that's why the camps are for guys who aren't well known, and so they come in, they like what they see, they send them out an offer.
And I'll just one more added context to this is like I've been in a lot of camps at Notre Dame, where they have brought in guys specifically to like earn an offer. It's like, okay. And they spend extra time with those guys. They move them around. They try them in different things. They do all these things to test them. And some guys they offer and some guys they don't. Well, I mentioned all those guys that they offered. It's not a long list. They bring in a ton of guys all the time and they don't offer them.
Yeah.
So that is something that matters. And Anthony Robinson this year, they brought him in. He had an offer, but they brought him into Irish Invasion.
Yeah.
They worked him out. They tried him at all these different things. He's higher rated, whatever.
Goes to a better school. Oh, no, I'm sorry. Goes to no, I don't want to say better school because that's not true because Lakota West is a good school. He goes to Destrehan, which is a very good school.
It's a good program. And for whatever reason, they saw him and they moved on. So, I mean, it says something that they worked a guy out and they were like, we're going to go with this guy. And I think, people shouldn't have, I always say like, don't have the blind trust in the coaches and all that. But in general, most of these guys, when they're getting to work with those guys that they know from so yeah, I just think it's you have to see how it goes, but in general, and I think you could probably look at camps from who across the country and guys who are rising seniors who go to earn offers, because there's a lot more guys who go who don't earn offers, but the guys who go and earn offers heading into their senior year, a lot of those guys end up being pretty solid players.
Yeah. So there's a lot going for Taebron Bennie-Powell here is what we're trying to say. All right, let's move on. Someone asked about Malcolm Ziegler. So let's talk about Malcolm Ziegler, the 4-star safety who is looking at North Carolina. He's looking at South Carolina. He's looking at Notre Dame. I think the visit went well, Jamie. I think it's a question of how hard is Notre Dame going to push here? Like, are they really pushing, or are they? Because look, you have Urlacher, they think they're going to land Bronte Johnson. They think they're going to land Taebron Bennie-Powell. Are they sold on Malcolm Ziegler as a safety? Is that true? Like, do they believe that? I honestly believe if they pushed, I think they would land him. But I don't know that they're pushing, And so that to me is kind of the difference. I don't think they have the same confidence in him as the other guys in terms of position fit. Do you have a read on that?
I mean, I don't have a read on exactly. It doesn't seem like they're pushing, like you said, I guess, but my thoughts on him. Like I've seen a lot of people like, oh, man, why aren't they taking it? Like you should be pushing for him. And I just have to say, I've watched him multiple times and seen more game film of him. And my opinion of him, go down when I watch guys. Sometimes it does, and it went down. Like I think he looks the part. He looks physically. He looks great.
He does look really.
He looks great coming off the bus, sure. And reported, that he ran a 4.38. I don't know if that's verified or not, but whatever. I mean, that's obviously fast. But I'll tell you what,
4.38 is what James said. 4.38.
He not And I don't think he's a good football player. He can't be later on, but he is. A lot of things. He has a lot of growth to his game that he has to go through.
Yeah.
I think he is a better athlete than a football player. And then even with some of that too, I don't think he's like the twitchiest guy. Like he's like long and can break. But I don't think he's the twitchiest. It's like transitions and the change of directions. So I mean, I think On3 has him like as like a top 100 guy, and then everybody else has him a 3-star.
Yeah.
And I mean, I've seen enough with him that I'm with everybody else. So I mean, if they want to take him, I think, yeah, okay, you could see like there's some definite upside there. But I definitely think there's a lot to his game. And then, I mean, I saw some effort stuff that I was like, I mean, you can coach a lot of stuff, but I mean, and you can coach effort too. I don't want to say that you can't. You can coach effort, you can coach physicality. People get better at that. But just kind of stuff, it's a bit red flaggy for me. So I'm not. He wouldn't be the highest on my board.
Right. And so Coach Humph says, I agree Ziegler doesn't seem to play to his time speed, but how slow does he have to be before it's too slow to be considered a top recruit in his case? So here's the thing. You don't have to, you can be like, obviously look at Kyle Hamilton, right? Like you can be a high 4.5 guy and be a top recruit, right? And you can be obviously a low 4.4 guy or whatever. It's not so much speed. It's that, does everything else check? Like Jamie said, right? Like if you, let's say you're not smooth in transitions and you're not like a fluid player and you're not like a great natural safety guy, right? And then maybe the speed doesn't really check out. And then you see some effort stuff. Well, now we're not checking a lot of boxes, right? Like now we're just kind of checking the off the bus box. That's great, but you do need football players. And so that's where you just get kind of dropped down. Like, say what you want about Locker, right? You're not going to see effort stuff from him. Like, that's not a problem. Like, he is going to
or physical
like
stuff.
Exactly. Like, that is not the issue with Kennedy Urlacher, right? Like, that is not it. Same thing with Taebron Bennie-Powell. Like, he is playing not his position, and he's out there doing it and making plays and chasing things down. Like, that's the kind of thing where, and like Bronte, in my opinion, he does have effort stuff on the tape where it's like, I don't know, but he checks all the other boxes. So it's like, hey, he's not playing his safe. Like he hasn't played safety. He didn't really want to play safety in high school. And so look, we're going to teach him, right? That's fine. Because all the other stuff gets checked. But with Ziegler, maybe it all doesn't get checked, right? And I can't speak for the staff on that stuff, right? Like, I just think there's enough red flaggy things on film to where it's like, if the staff decides to move on, there must be something there. Or I don't want to say move on because I don't know that's what they're doing. If they're just not pushing, then there must be something, right? There must be something to it. So that's where it just like, you can't build up. You gotta be checking boxes. And if you're not checking those boxes, like, it's not any one thing that kind of makes the staff queasy. It's just like the accumulation of things that can make the staff queasy on that sort of thing. So that's where it is with Ziegler. I think if they decide like, hey, we're good with all of this stuff, like all of our questions get answered and he starts checking the boxes, then they'll go with him. I'm not going to kill him for it. I don't, or I won't, but I can see why they wouldn't. So that's kind of where I come out on him. Anything else on Ziegler, Jamie?
No, not really. Like I feel the same. Like if they took him, I would understand why they took him. But to me, he is. I think a lot of times people put project and they think like, oh, that's they think it's like, oh, physically he's got to develop into this, right,
Right.
or whatever. And I think there's a lot of other pieces, and that's why I would consider him in the territory for me.
Keyshawn Flowers also visited. This is another case where how much is Notre Dame pushing, right? Like that's another one where they have KVA. Bradley Shaw just visited, right? And I think they feel a lot better about him. So if you have KVA and you have Bradley Shaw, I think you're going to push for those guys. And if you don't land Bradley Shaw, maybe then you really go in on Keyshawn Flowers, right? I do wonder if they thought things would go as well with Bradley Shaw as they did. And now Keyshawn Flowers is kind of in a weird spot as far as, whether they're going to take him, because I don't think they need to take 5 linebackers. Maybe they do, or maybe they're willing to. It just doesn't seem that way. So, I think he's a good football player, right? Like if he ended up in the class, I would understand that and I would be fine with it. But I think they want Shaw, and I think they obviously want KVA ahead of him. They need to find out where that's going. It doesn't sound like Shaw is going to take a super long time. I don't think he's in decision mode at this moment, but I don't think he may not go beyond the summer, in which case they can try to be as patient as possible with Flowers, and hope that works out later. But what's your take on that situation, Jamie?
I mean, I'd focus on Shaw and KVA, and then just, I think with Flowers, there's things I like about him, and he has a couple things that he can do really well, and he's a good athlete, and I think he's got some high pass rush potential, but I think he is kind of closer to, I kind of would put him like, if you're going to take Bodie Calhoun, then you don't take Keyshawn Flowers, is how I would kind of do it. Like, I get, like, you could take him and he might turn out fine, but I just think they're better off just focusing on, KVA and Shaw. I mean, if they get both, that would be pretty impressive.
Man, if they get both, man, so here's the thing. If they get both of those guys, that's why it's okay to take Rizak and Cahoon, because you have those guys who like they can play linebacker.
Yes,
and that's what you want safety to be. Like, that's the whole point. Is like that's what we're saying. You want to land a KVA and a Bradley Shaw type, and then you can take flyers on Taebron Bennie-Powell and Bronte Johnson and guys like that. So that's where that is. Jamie, I think we have to. This went way too long. We have to get Coach Hump's hypothetical on Thursday, but that's good because there shouldn't be a ton of news, and we can just focus on that, because that's like, I would try to fit it in. We could, but it's like kind of a long conversation, in my opinion. It might be like a 20-minute thing. And I don't want Coach Hump. I don't want to shortchange your hypothetical. So we're going to push it to Thursday. So that's what we're going to talk about then. And so we'll end it here. Thank you everyone for tuning in. We apologize for the internet stuff. These things come up and it's like you have to troubleshoot in like a couple minutes, and it doesn't always work out. So we apologize for that.
This is what happens sometimes when you go live.
You go live, and we don't have the big we don't have the big budgets. We don't have the big budgets, Jamie, that the powerhouses have. So that's what we're doing with. But I appreciate everyone for tuning in. If this is your first time, if you liked what you heard, hit the like button, hit subscribe button, hit the notification bell. Links to the podcast are below in the description here. And so you can check us out if you'd like the audio form and you want to listen over it again. So thank you, everyone. We'll be back on Thursday. Have a good rest of your day.